Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Eyes on Africa News online at eoanews.com and right here on YouTube at Hermela TV. It is Tuesday, November 8th, and here are your top stories. Somalia's fight against al-Shabaab militants continues as activists say people inside the country are feeling both fear and outrage at the lack of accountability. Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for several attacks in the last few months, including a raid of a hotel in the capital of Mogadishu that killed dozens and car bombings that killed more than 100 and injured 300 others. We'll speak with an activist on the ground about why the people are taking matters into their own hands. Some high-level meetings are taking place in Egypt where the UN Climate Change Conference continues this week, but it's not all about the environment. How Eastern African countries are coming together around the fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We'll speak with an analyst who says he's not convinced that it will solve the real issues. And day 2 of meetings in Kenya about the Ethiopia peace deal, representatives from the Ethiopian government and leaders of the rebels are discussing next steps. One key element of the African Union peace deal is transitional justice. Experts say it may be the first time that the AU is using this model of justice. Coming up, we'll speak with criminal defense attorney Derege Demissie about the elements of transitional justice and what that means for the people of Ethiopia. We're going to get right into this conversation about transitional justice. Let me just read the UN definition of it. I don't know how helpful it is, but it'll give us a starting point. So transitional justice is an approach to systematic or massive violations of human rights that both provides redress to the victims and creates or enhances opportunities for the transformation of the political systems, conflicts, and other conditions that may have been at the root of the abuses. When I read that, I think country overhaul. A lot of work. So yeah. What is transitional justice?
So it's basically a system of addressing large-scale atrocities, crimes that cannot be adequately addressed in the regular court system. So the main thing that distinguishes transitional system from the regular court system is it has an element of reconciliation, and at the end of it, the purpose is not just punishment. So in a regular court process, you have a trial, you have a judgment of guilt, and there's going to be some punishment. And the purpose of that is to provide law and order for society and address the needs of society to hold people accountable, to punish, rehabilitate, and so on and so forth. In a transitional justice system, it's a process that follows large-scale atrocities involving thousands of people or hundreds of people. And the idea is the country is going to enter a new era, and it's going to do something, a process by which the atrocities can be addressed, victims will have some type of redress, there's going to be reconciliation to make sure it does not happen not only in that area, but in all other areas of the country. There will be lessons learned as a country, and there's going to be a healing process whereby people can vent their frustration, express their wound, what they felt, show their wounds, confront those people who perpetrated those crimes. There's going to be a process where people confess to what they've done, express remorse. And in that process, there's going to be some people who will be held accountable and maybe referred to a regular court process or some type of formal process of a legal process where that person can be punished. However, the expectation is at the end of the process, there's going to be a national healing, a collective healing process. So you call it transitional justice for lack of a better term to capture the fact that there's going to be a new era to which the country will transition. There's going to be some form of justice that addresses the crime that were committed, but it's not the same as the criminal justice system. So we're not talking about the regular criminal court or a regular criminal court system. It would include some aspects of the country's customs and traditions in resolving disputes and resolving issues, even involving crimes. So, in Ethiopian context, it's very interesting when I was looking at this peace deal that was just signed on November 2nd. It refers to the African Transitional Justice Policy. And the African Transitional Justice Policy is something that's been in the works since 2006, 2008, and was concluded in 2019 in Addis Ababa and at the AU summit in Addis Ababa. So it would be the first time that it would be involved in a major dispute resolution process such as this one. And it's ironic or interesting that this policy that was implemented in 2019 in Addis Ababa is going to be for the first time be implemented in Ethiopia. And the peace deal that was drafted and signed says that the Ethiopian government will implement laws in consultation with civil societies and stakeholders to come up with a framework of transitional justice. So there's no such thing as one sort of one size fits all transitional justice that every country would apply. The idea is it's flexible enough to meet the needs of different societies. It will incorporate some traditional and customary aspects, and it will allow that particular society to move on. So there are many transitional justice processes that were attempted in Sri Lanka, in Brazil, in Colombia, Sierra Leone, you name it, different places, and they all look different. The only the similarities in all is there's an attempt at reconciliation. There is an attempt at addressing mass, large-scale criminal activities.
Hi, everybody. This is Hermela Aragawi of EOAnews.com and on YouTube.com/Hermela TV. This video will walk you through how to become a patron of my Patreon account. It's a subscription model. NPR and other publicly funded news outlets use a model like this. It allows the company, the entity, to stay as independent as possible by being viewer funded. So I'll walk you through how to go to patreon.com/Hermela TV, sign up, and then become a monthly member. You'll first go to your browser on your phone or laptop and type in patreon.com/Hermela TV, patreon.com/Hermela TV. This is what the page will look like. You'll then click here where it says become a member. Then it will take you to a sign up page where you'll create a Patreon account that will require your name, your email address, and your new password for this account. So it will then either take you back to this page where you can click become a patron again, or it's possible it will take you to this landing page where on the left side you'll see the option for find creators. Click on that, and in the search box type Hermela TV. My account will show up, then it'll take you to this page. It will default to a monthly contribution of $5, but you can change that to whatever amount you would like. Here are two common issues that people run into. It may ask you for your state, country, and zip code. If it does that, just enter the information and continue on. You also have to go to the email of the email address you used for sign up and verify your account. So go to your email. You'll have gotten an email from Patreon. And you have to click verify email address and then return to the browser where you are signing up. Then you will enter your credit card info and click on pay with card, and that's it. So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the people on the ground can probably expect nothing for a while. Like right now in the immediate aftermath of this peace deal, what could be the first thing that people on the ground or the government officials could even start to do? I mean, it doesn't even seem like the systems are in place to get this going yet.
Actually, that is very correct. And in fact, the peace deal itself says after the implementation of everything that was listed in Article 7.2, the transitional justice process will begin. So when you look at Article 7.2, that's where they list all of the things that the Ethiopian government is supposed to do and all of the things the TPLF is supposed to do, including the disarmament process, the rehabilitation process, the reconstruction process. Um, and after that is accomplished, there will be a process whereby new set of laws, legislation would be introduced in the Ethiopian parliament, and that has to be passed into law. We don't have a system right now. Right now, if you bring someone if you arrest someone, you have to put them in the regular court system. They have a right to be tried within a certain period of time. They have to be presented to court within 48 hours and all that. All those um, guarantees that are provided under the Constitution would apply to every person that's arrested. The alternative is uh, the military court of justice, and whether or not you can try civilian combatants in a military court, that's a different story, and whether you can apply that is a different story as well. So you cannot right now bring thousands of people into the criminal court process and provide legitimate, fair trial for each person. It's not doable. And the alternative is to do what you need to do first, which is restore the rule of law, law and order. You have the space to have a consultative process whereby you can bring in stakeholders to come up with a policy of restorative and transitional justice, and then pass a law that provides for substantive as well as procedural provisions to accomplish that. And after all that, have a process of implementation. So I think this is a process that would take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not designed to happen overnight. Like any process that involves reconciliation and healing, it's going to take a significant amount of time. The idea is also to use this process to educate people. And you need to have this televised to some extent. You need to have it translated into different languages. People need to draw lessons from this. Um, there has to be investigation and documentation of the crimes. And that's also is done by the Transitional Justice Commission. Under the African Transitional Justice Policy, you would have multiple commissions. The commission that provides for the transitional justice is sort of a different commission that oversees the reconciliation process. So you may have multiple commissions and multiple stages, and there's going to be a lengthy process.
Interesting. So, in terms of the type of laws that Ethiopia could pass, is it alternative forms of judicial process, something faster, something that says you don't have to go through the same process that you would in regular hearings, or what kind of laws would need to get passed before seeing this through?
Yes, so the law needs to provide for a staggered appearance of different levels of culpability, people with different culpability. For example, you don't want to mix people who are suspected of committing large scale atrocities who commanded, for example, the killing of people in Maikadra or another setting, right? with someone who carried out maybe a single incident of murder or mayhem or some type of physical assault. You don't want to mix that with someone who's charged with sexual assault, for example. So you need to create a system of grouping people, number one. You have also crimes committed in different areas. So in order to bring victims and perpetrators together, you need to delineate areas, and you need to also have these events take place at the localities where the crime took place. And it's going to be in the Tigray region, Amhara region, Afar region. You're covering a large area that is as big as some of these African countries. So when you talk about incidents that involve millions of people, that covers such a large area of land, you'd have to have a system where you're properly grouping people. You have to provide sometimes translators for victims and also perpetrators. You need to create a group of individuals who would oversee the process. So you have to train those people. We don't have enough people trained um, the in law right now to cover even this type of process. So there's going to be a large scale training for people who would oversee this. There's going to be a commission that would oversee that. So
And do we have a sense if that this commission, because this was an African Union-led peace deal that included other African countries and leaders of other African countries, what does the transitional committee or body look like? Is it something that, do we have a sense of that from the peace deal? Is it going to be made up of Ethiopians within Ethiopia, or is there a language that suggests that other Africans can actually be a part of getting transitional justice in the country?
Usually, you don't involve foreigners in this type of setting. Not only that, this is going to be a purely Ethiopian-led, Ethiopian-managed affair, because you can imagine the technical difficulties of providing for translators and having people educating people on the local customs and culture and all that. So, and you don't need them. I mean, it's not a situation where you're going to have a formal trial of people with prosecutors and judges. That's not going to happen. That's not what this is about. This is a process where you have perpetrators, victims, you have a group of people who are watching what's happening, you have individuals who are overseeing this process for the low level people, right? And then when you get to a point where you have to hold individuals accountable for serious acts of atrocities, then you'd have to bring those people, some of those people, into a regular court where they're going to be prosecuted. Um, there's some talk about in the African transitional justice policy, there's reference about incorporating traditions and customs. In Ethiopian context, um, customarily, when someone commits a crime, there's a process by which they confess, they hear what the victim has to say, they make reparations, and then there's some type of reconciliation. So that aspect can be included, but it all depends on what goes into the legislation, because the peace deal says there's going to be a law that would be enacted by the Ethiopian parliament. So what that law is going to look like would inform what the process is going to be like. So my hope and expectation is that it will include some aspect of the cultural traditional practices of dispute resolution. And once you have all that, you still have the reconciliation part. And you can, for example, in South African setting, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there was an interest in finding the truth, and the emphasis was finding the truth. So people who came forward and told the atrocities committed, the tortures they inflicted on their victims, they were given a pass at the end. Some people who refused to acknowledge the truth, they were referred for prosecution. So the other aspect that's referred in the African transitional justice policy is the need to memorialize events
Right.
and memorialization of victims. So, in Ethiopian context, when you're talking about victors' court and victors' justice, they pick and choose who the victim is, and they memorialize just as that victim or one incident that they care about. But in this situation, you need to memorialize what happened in different communities and to different people, and so that's another element of it.
Yeah, and it seems like an important one. I mean, we've talked about this before, this idea that we shouldn't put up this victor's monument no matter what, how this war ended, because so many lives had been lost. And every time, at least in recent history, when a war is won, there's something put up by the victors, and the all the loss really gets lost in it. So the idea of memorializing what the cost of this war was, it seems like it would do a service in the future. Can you talk a little bit about the way that we have done it, Ethiopia, when I say we, has done it in recent decades, when the Derg overthrew the Haile Selassie regime, and then the TPLF-led coalition overthrew the Derg? How was it done then? And then in 2018, when there was a transition, a much more peaceful transition, how do those transitions compare to what we're trying to do, what Ethiopia is trying to do now?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I think it provides a fertile ground for discussion of what should happen at the end of a conflict, and whether how you resolve that conflict and how you deal with the aftermath of that conflict affects how well you can move on, and allows your ability not to repeat, not to have to not to avoid similar conflicts in the future. So in 1974, when the Derg took over and overthrew the monarchy, again, they arrested over more than 60 former officials, but they executed 60 of them without trial. Initially, they said they were going to give them a fair trial. They were detained. They set up some type of commission to study what should happen to them. The commission was supposed to recommend the Mermari Commission, is what they were saying. That was referred to, investigation commission. And it had some prominent people, including Professor Mesfin Waldemariam and others. But then the Derg co-opted that process and executed 60 of them. That really set the tone for the country. Up until that time, there was not a tradition of mass execution. People it was a shock to the entire system and the entire society. Even during Haile Selassie, when there was an attempt to overthrow the king, the government only killed 2 people. One of them was almost wounded, and basically I think he was almost dead. But the Germame Nuai and Mengistu Nuai, those 2 people were the ones who were executed. Everyone else was given very minor sentences. But moving forward, the Derg took over, killed all those people. And that really, I think, set a tone for what followed with the Red Terror and all that. Killing became an accepted means of resolving disputes. Then came the TPLF. They took over. They jailed a bunch of a lot of former officials, charged them with genocide and different crimes. Um, they were given sentences of life, imprisonment, and all that. I think some might have received the death penalty. I'm not sure. No one from any other warring faction, whether it's the EPLF or TPLF or OLF or any other group, was prosecuted for anything. Okay. I mean, it's inconceivable that there was no atrocity whatsoever by anyone else, right? Not that I'm, advocating that Derg officials should not be prosecuted, but they were the only ones who were prosecuted. So that's what you referred to as Victor's Court. And then when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power, he pretty much said, we can't afford to jail everyone. We don't have enough space, even if we want to, do that. It's not practical. Let's just forgive everyone and move on. And that also emboldened some people, right? And so when the government tried to arrest the former security head and sent police officers, federal police, to Mekelle to make an arrest, you remember what they did to them? They arrested the police. They arrested the federal police and sent them back. So that's what I meant by emboldening the people who should face some accountability. So you can't not do anything, and you can't also just blame the other side and completely provide victor's justice. There's also another model, though, which is what happened in the U.S. context after the United States Civil War in 1865. So after 5 years of carnage, which claimed 620,000 people's lives, the Confederate Army surrendered to the Union Army. And at that time, they could have prosecuted everyone or arrested a lot of them. But the leader of the Union Army, General Grant, allowed the surrender of the Confederate leaders at the courthouse in Appomattox in Virginia. He allowed them to come in with their sidearms and allowed them to leave with sidearms and their mule. And that allowed the South to move on. However, because there was no retribution or there was no accountability, a lot of those people ended up becoming, not a lot of them, significant number of the Confederacy became part of the KKK that then perpetrated a lot of atrocities against the Black people. There was a lot of problems following that. However, you can say because of that magnanimous act, the hatred or the tension between the South and the North was lessened. Assume, for example, all those people were killed or murdered or prosecuted or arrested. How would this country been able to move on from that situation? Would they have succeeded to continue to build a nation without another civil war in the coming 150 years, right? So the idea is after a conflict, you want to have a process that left people to say, okay, I'm willing to move on. I've learned a lesson. What we have gone through is something that should not be repeated. And I'm committed to moving forward. I'm not looking back. If I look back, it's to remember those who lost their lives, who suffered, not as a way of inspiring people to take revenge, but as a way of inspiring people to remember that and not allow it to happen again. So that is I think that's, to me, that is the goal of transitional justice, with a component of reconciliation and healing.
Yeah, there's a couple of very specific questions. Messai is asking what is going to happen to some of the soldiers within ENDF that sided with TPLF during that Northern Command attack. Is there levels to this, or is there, is everyone kind of looked at the same, whether it's a TPLF cadre that assaulted somebody or killed somebody within the Ethiopian military that turned on their comrades? I mean, is there a distinction rather?
Yeah. So the issue with the military people, they've sort of violated two set of laws. One is, especially if they are active duty military, they've violated a military code of conduct and military law, so they would be subject to court martial. And then if they committed additional atrocities, that would be another process. So I can anticipate for higher level military people, there's got to be some type of military court tribunal or military court process, uh, unless that legislation that would be passed says that would be wrapped into, their violation would be wrapped into the transitional justice process. Because as a military, I know the military is very sensitive about, not just Ethiopian military, everywhere, very sensitive about making sure that the soldiers have abide by their code of conduct, and you don't want to set an example where you do that kind of atrocity or act of treason and not and get away with it. However, this is a unique situation. So, and a lot of the people who are negotiating, including the top commanders, were our former military officials, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very hard to make them accountable on the military tribunal side. So my guess is there may be some type of process. With the military, you also have pensions, you have benefits. Are they going to continue to get those benefits? I don't know. Maybe that's something the government is going to look at. But again, this is a trade-off. You are trading off holding people accountable, being able to punish them, for some type of guarantee through this process that this would not be repeated elsewhere in Ethiopia, or would not be repeated in that
Right.
region.
It would be a first, I guess, in modern history. Is there anyone that appears to be immune? And what I mean by that is those representatives, TPLF representatives that were in South Africa and are now in Nairobi, are they essentially immune because they are commanding from a distance, or is it possible that they could be brought into the fold? And then the other question with that is, I still don't know who is fully responsible for orchestrating this war on the TPLF leadership side. On one hand, you look at people like Getachew Reda, they look like they are the spokesperson for the TPLF, but did he really have a hand in making this decision? Was this a groupthink thing where you don't know where it began and ended because they were operating as a group mind?
Yeah.
Do you have any insight on that?
The most interesting aspect of this process to me is, if you're going to say this is a truth finding mission, it's a process where what happened will be documented. I cannot imagine that being happening without the top people speaking out. Who planned the attack on the federal garrison? How was it planned? Where are the documents? Who sat in these meetings? Who said what? If you can't have those people responsible or accountable, And whether you punish them or not, if you don't have them go through this process and come clean and tell you what really happened, how are you going to ask the rank and file and the low
Right.
level people to do that? So at some point, you're going to have to decide how you're going to get this done, top from top to mid level, and the level, the bottom rank and file is the least problematic, right? So most of the time they would say we were told to do this, or
Right.
we were ordered, and maybe we went a little bit overboard, and um, we got carried away. But then you need the people who gave commands, and both sides. It cannot just be the TPLF side. There are, soldiers right now who are being prosecuted by the Ethiopian government, Ethiopian soldiers. 30 plus soldiers are in court proceedings. So, who organized the Maikadra massacre? Okay, how was it? Who knew what? And that's the stuff that you need to know. Um, Not just the guy who went from house to house and selected people for killing, but who organized that, and how high does it go? And that's the kind of stuff that you need to ask, not just the mid-level people, but the top people, including the leaders.
Yeah, it seems to me a lot of the lower level people probably woke up in a nightmare like everyone else. I mean, the perpetrators and the victims both. When I read about how my cadre happened, the level of fear that was among everybody and that provoked some of the atrocities, you can't help but empathize, even with the perpetrators who were basically told that death was coming and then did some really egregious things. So I would hope at the top there's some clarity about what happened, who decided this, who thought that this was a good idea. One of the people you brought up, I believe you were talking about Getachew Asafa, the former intelligence head. Do you know anything about where he is? There's some rumors that he might have been the mastermind in all this. It just doesn't seem to
Yeah,
me that Getachew Reda and Saad Khan were the ones that decided this is how it was going to go.
I have no idea. I have no information. But the other aspect is you're going to have some victims who come forward and say, "I was attacked by, soldiers who look like they were Eritrean, for example." And how do you do that? How do you provide accountability? That's another sorry. That's another problem. One second.
It's okay. We're going to wrap up.
I have a dog in my office here, so I have to let her
We're
go.
live. No, it's
So
yeah,
yeah,
we're wrapping it anyway.
so yeah, so you're gonna have that problem, and this is not going to be a process that is so clean and well run and without any problems. It's going to have issues, but the point is everyone needs to understand there is not a clean way of doing this you cannot bring thousands of people to criminal court. Even if you want to prosecute everyone, you can't provide a lawyer and guarantee them a fair and uh, just trial. If you put them in the regular criminal court, it's not going to happen. It's impossible, let alone Ethiopia. Even the United States cannot do that. Right now, just coming out of the pandemic, the court system is clogged up just from not having operated for several months. And, there are a lot of people who are languishing in jail beyond the set time for speedy trial. If you're talking about 100,000 people in Ethiopia, you're not going to be able to do that. But we can do something, and this is probably the next best thing we can do.
Yeah, a lot, really, really a lot to unpack. Derege Demissie, thank you so much for your time, for your insight. We hope to see you again to unpack some more of this piece deal. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hi, everybody. This is Hermela Aragawi of EOAnews.com and on YouTube.com/Hermela TV. This video will walk you through how to become a patron of my Patreon account. It's a subscription model. NPR and other publicly funded news outlets use a model like this. It allows the company, the entity, to stay as independent as possible by being viewer funded. So I'll walk you through how to go to patreon.com/Hermela TV, sign up, and then become a monthly member. You'll first go to your browser on your phone or laptop and type in patreon.com/Hermela TV, patreon.com/Hermela TV. This is what the page will look like. You'll then click here where it says become a member. Then it'll take you to a sign up page where you'll create a Patreon account that will require your name, your email address, and your new password for this account. So it will then either take you back to this page where you can click become a patron again, or it's possible it will take you to this landing page where on the left side you'll see the option for find creators. Click on that, and in the search box type Hermela TV. My account will show up, then it'll take you to this page. It will default to a monthly contribution of $5, but you can change that to whatever amount you would like. Here are two common issues that people run into. It may ask you for your state, country, and zip code. If it does that, just enter the information and continue on. You also have to go to the email of the email address you used for sign up and verify your account. So go to your email. You'll have gotten an email from Patreon. You have to click verify email address and then return to the browser where you are signing up. Then you will enter your credit card info and click on pay with card, and that's it. And please make sure you pass it around to your friends and family members that you know are interested in supporting independent journalism, particularly independent journalism that tells stories out of Africa from the perspective of the African people. I know a lot of us in Ethiopia, Eritrea, the Horn are celebrating the peace deal that was agreed to last week, but the disinformation in an effort to divide is not going to stop. In fact, we are seeing indications that it is ramping up. So we need to build these independent outlets. We need to scale up. Most of the production that you guys see on my YouTube channel is done by a production team of one, and we can't keep that going for much longer. So we need to hire some editors, some writers, and we need to hire good ones that are, if they don't already understand the general style of news out of Africa and what to look out for, they need to be trained, and we need to get at least part-time people in here, but also full-time to really be able to keep up with the daily news. And hope to see you on patreon.com/Hermela TV.